The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana and today is Tuesday the 8th of October and it's 10 o'clock. I hope you have had a wonderful morning so far. I know it's the sun's out. It's a little bit obviously chilly. I actually have a cold, so you're going to have to excuse my slightly kind of froggy voice this morning. But today is a really special show because I am joined by an amazing guest who is the author of the book Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling, which has been written by Suma Din. And basically it's a book that I came across quite maybe a couple of years ago, and it was actually through Shamiza Rashid, who obviously presents the Urban Cube, and which is the first time I actually spoke to Suma, was actually obviously absolutely wonderful. And since then, I've been following her work, and this book is absolutely amazing. So I'm just going to read the blurb, and then we'll be joined over the phone by Suma to talk through some of the really, I think, interesting and intriguing kind of findings about this book, Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling. So the blurb says, this book brings the voices of Muslim mothers into the discourse on parent-school relations. What they say is essential reading for teachers, student teachers, sociology of education students, policymakers, and those working with families. Suma Din's study gives voice to over 50 women from a wide range of African, Arab, and Asian backgrounds, all social classes, some of them immigrants, but many of them born in the UK. They speak about the hijab, choice of schools, religious festivals, the curriculum, the prevent strategy, sex and relationship education, and much else. The book sheds light on their identities, experiences, and challenges as they support their children through state schools in Britain. So this is going to be a really interesting show today. And I know many of our listeners hopefully will be listening in who maybe you are a mother yourself, or maybe a teacher, or maybe you're on a governing board at a school. Or maybe you're actually a young person at home at the moment who's kind of gone through the education system, who also might want to share, experiences of just going through the school system really, and how we've all kind of navigated what it means to be, a Muslim mother in British society. And I know obviously it's one of those things that is talked about quite a lot, whether it's in politics or just generally through schools. And as obviously a mother myself and also a teacher, I think it was really wonderful to be able to pick up a book and read something where my own experiences were reflected in, kind of so many facets of life. And I think it's definitely a really important book, and which is actually giving a platform to our voices as Muslim mothers, which is so important is in this current kind of social political climate. And if you do have any thoughts or views as you're listening to the discussion, you can call in on 01582 481 822, or you can WhatsApp in on 07779 481 822. So coming back to the book today, so Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling. I mean, it's probably a different book from what I've usually speak about on the show, because it is one of those. And actually when I was speaking to even Suma recently, in order to prepare for the show, and she was just mentioning actually academic books, or those kind of in that genre aren't always maybe discussed as much. I mean, some of obviously the listeners, you might know that I run actually a Dharamana book club in Luton, and again we tend to obviously we try to be as diverse as we can in terms of our book selection. So we read obviously fiction, non-fiction, and we always try to read things that maybe are out of our comfort zone, which we wouldn't normally read. And that's one of the beauties actually of book club, to be able to come together as a group and just read something that maybe wouldn't normally read, and hopefully obviously learn as well. And I think that's why obviously I do feel that I'm so passionate about the book club show for Inspire FM as well. This idea that I know many of us sometimes don't get a chance necessarily to read, because obviously we do have quite busy lives. And this kind of show really is for those people who maybe really do want to read, or maybe just want to discuss some themes that actually are out there in kind of the literature world, so to speak. So being able to, I think, just listen into the show and listen into discussion and I think that in itself can be quite, I guess, just really interesting. And hopefully what I would really love is the idea that maybe if you listen to something on the show and then maybe you can have a conversation in your own spaces and just kind of carry on those conversations, which are so important. So we will be joined by Suma on the phone, who is the author of Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling. So Suma Din is a writer, researcher and educator who has worked with parents in the adult learning sector. She has over 2 decades experience in the voluntary sector supporting women and children's projects and interfaith work. And even, for example, it's something which has been, the book itself has been published by UCL, the Institute of Education Press. And again, as somebody who, I actually did my PhD at the Institute of Education, in terms of an institution, it definitely is one that I would like to say, and it's not just because I went there, they are kind of producing, the educators of the next generation. And I think that it's so important to be able to just have that access, I guess, and have that platform and hopefully support to be able to voice, all the opinions that we really need to share. So I am delighted to be introducing Suma over the line. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Imrana.
How are you this morning?
Alhamdulillah, I'm well. I think I'm coming down with something, so I'm going to apologise for coughing halfway.
No problem. I'm in the same boat, and I know there's many people. Yeah. It's just one of those. It's the weather. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you very much, Imrana, for the invite.
Oh no, I'm so glad that you're taking the time out to be able to speak to us this morning. And if you wouldn't mind, maybe if we could just start off with a little bit of background on how your book, Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling, came about, and then we can spend a little bit of time after talking about some of the themes.
Yeah, sure. About 4 to 5 years ago, I went back to university. I was doing my master's in social justice and education, and there was quite a lot about race and sort of critical race theory, and all the things revolving around race in education.
Yes,
and so I'd looked at the experience of Muslim children in one particular area of deprivation as part of my studies. And when I finished all that, I realised that actually there was very little in the library. I was at the IOE, the Institute of Education, which is like the world's best place for educational research. And there was just nothing that I could put my finger on and say, okay, that book or those articles represent or actually give voice to the experience Muslim mothers are having through the school system. There were studies done which were sort of more culturally based. So there's like quite a well-known one about a Mirpuri community in Oxford, for example, and their relationship with education, or a community up in Bradford and their relationship with education. So it took valuable research, but it was from a cultural perspective,
yes,
and often from an immigration perspective. And I just knew what I was going through. I've got 3 children. They're grown up now, mashallah, but I went through the whole school system with them. I was born in this country, so I can see it from being a kid here.
Yes, yeah.
And then all our contemporaries, friends, relatives, I knew that this is another group that needs their voices heard. They're significant. Even though we have so much diversity within Muslim parents, cultures, mothers, I'm not using those terms in the narrow sense, sort of whoever mothers, whether it's a grandmother or a foster care, or, the role is the same, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that there's, over the years, over sort of 20 years, we've seen that evolution of our identities, and we are creating our own identities, which often do have the faith as a central part.
Yeah.
Quite different to, say, my mom's generation here, who came in the late 60s. So, all those things put together actually pushed me to say, you know what, I will do the research then. I'll look for just some of the themes at least, because those who are in teacher training or in the social sector doing really important family engagement jobs, or in the foster area. There's so many areas within that sector of care and families and education, who I don't think they get a window in through literature, at least, through their personal experience they do. So a number of areas I've just quickly touched on, that all came together. And I thought, well, I have the access to parents, to mothers. I've just done this master's, which had a great qualitative research module in it. And I wanted to use that without having to go through sort of the long path of a PhD and da-da-da. And, that's like, I'm probably a bit impatient, and I thought, right, I just want to do this. And because, alhamdulillah, I got a very good response from the publishers, I went ahead with doing the research because I knew it would be published by them.
Yeah, that's actually so interesting to hear that process of what led to it. I think it's and it, again, like you said, it's really giving this platform to something that wasn't already there. So what do you feel, I mean, what is in your opinion that is contributing to the idea that actually as Muslim mothers, we, I guess historically or up until now, have been kind of absent from the public discourse around, schooling or education? I mean, what do you think has partly led to that, do you think?
I think in terms of on the ground involvement, mothers from Muslim backgrounds, being as broad as possible here, because my research was broad. I had Somali mothers, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, English Muslim mothers, Arab Muslim mothers, smaller proportions, but speaking across that spectrum, they have been really involved on the ground.
Sure.
And they really are passionate about their children's education, and they do what they can. They do their best. That came across the most strongly. But coming back to your question of why they're absent from public discourse, I think there's so many factors. This identity has evolved slowly. And so before, people were involved in the public discussion through their Pakistani identity or the Bangladeshi identity, that kind of thing. That's one area or one reason. The other reason why they're absent is it's quite difficult to be part of policy unless you're in academic positions or you're in, something influential, think tanks and all of that. And our mothers historically aren't in those areas. It's improved. It's changing a lot. Year on year, there are more mothers involved in this, but it's quite difficult to be at that level. Not to say that there aren't researchers now who are Muslim researchers, and they're also parents, also mothers, depending on what their research area is. They are contributing a lot in that area. But coming back to mothers who, there might be an absence, there's definitely that feeling that there's an absence in terms of communicating with schools or communicating. So we're back to the sort of grassroots level here I'm talking about. And there's a lot of reasons for that, if you want me to go through those.
Well, I mean, I guess it's kind of thinking about, like you said, that there must be some factors that are contributing to that. And this idea that, do you think when we talk about communication, is it that it's at the moment not like a two-way street where, like you said, that there are Muslim mothers who are really, really invested in their children's education, but do you think then there's a lack, I mean, maybe not a lack, but something missing from the side of the educators then? So from your research and the book that you've, the stories that you've got from the mothers themselves, is there something that can bridge that gap then between mothers and the educators, and how that communication can be kind of more, I guess, meaningful and impactful?
Yeah, and two-way. So much about that in the book. Firstly, there's a lot about the mothers that they talked about the reason that some of them are not involved. And those are structural issues there. Some of them want to be involved, but they felt they didn't know how to be because they don't know what PTA is, they don't know what the governors do. They don't, so there's structural issues there, especially if they didn't grow up here. Those are sort of the big ones. And then there's things like different cultural expectations. People are coming from different places, and in some countries you don't get involved with the school. You're not meant to.
No, sure.
And whereas here that's changed quite a lot in the last sort of 30 years. There's been a lot more of a shift towards the policy of parents being engaged with the school and, you know, really being partners. School partnership, parents-teacher partnership has evolved as well. Another reason why sometimes they're not in contact as much is they feel a lack of confidence and lack of support.
Yeah.
It's quite difficult to communicate with staff if you don't feel confident yourself.
Yeah.
And I'm coming to your actual question just
No, that's all good.
about how to improve this.
Yes.
Just putting some of the things that my mother said in the research. Sometimes they want to be involved, but they feel barriers in terms of their responsibilities. I had about 53 mums answering interview questions and being part of the focus group. And for some of them, the joint family system, caring for elderly relatives, in-laws, their own parents, actually meant that they couldn't participate as much as they wanted to in school life, and they couldn't communicate when they felt it was necessary, purely because they just had too many responsibilities. So there's a whole spectrum of reasons why they said they felt people weren't involved as much as they could be.
Yeah.
How do we improve that? Coming to your question. There's many suggestions that my mum's made, and I'll actually go through that, is that there need to be, on both sides, sort of more organised communication. So for the teachers, for example, those who have worked in schools, because I had quite a few mums who were working in different capacities in their local schools, from deputy head to teaching assistants to lunchtime supervisors. They said that then there was a need for more training for staff so they don't make assumptions about the mothers, and because that put a lot of mothers off. They felt that there was like a negative identity from the media, from different quarters, and that actually puts some mothers off. They don't want to have direct communication, and if that sort of training, part of insets or other forms of training, would help inform staff about the diversity in the Muslim cultures, fact versus fiction versus myth versus culture. That was one thing that they quite strongly recommended, and that came from different mothers in different settings, because I went to 5 locations across England.
Brilliant,
Another thing, just to summarise, is that there needs to be a lot more information sharing about the processes in the school. So how do you get involved in this, or how do you just sort of offer to set up a club, a gardening club or something? There's a lot of goodwill there, but there's this gap between what mothers want to contribute and do, or even to do with the curriculum. When we discussed curriculum, there was quite a significant proportion of moms who said, we just didn't know, or we weren't explained to about what was in that part of the curriculum, and which is why we had trouble with it, for example. So communication is the key, really, and in finding ways to improve that dialogue, so that we get away from this whole stereotype of the Muslim mothers who go in and complain about things. That was
I'm not one of those. I'm not one of those, by the way. Not at all.
No, I don't know. I had mothers saying, I identify as a Muslim mom, but not one of those moms. And when I probed them, that's exactly what they said. I don't want to be identified as one that comes in just to complain. So what a lot of my book's saying, with the help of all these mothers' stories, is go in beforehand, make a relationship with teachers. If you don't feel confident, there's always a more confident mom. You go together, or another parent. But have a positive relationship, so it's not based on complaints and problems.
Yeah, of course, exactly. Yeah.
Because it's a two-way street. A lot of teachers say, we don't hear from what the mothers think or what they experience. They don't tell us.
Yeah, sure. That's so interesting, isn't it? Because this kind of whole two-way street, which is obviously counts, in anything. But I think even for myself, I think because obviously as a mother who needs to sometimes obviously go to teachers to communicate certain things about my children, but also then on the other side being a teacher, I think you're right, because it's almost like both sides really need to be making, I guess, that concerted effort. But I guess coming back to the point that you made about Muslim mothers, potentially their confidence also being affected by certain perceptions that teachers might hold, which obviously might be rooted in something more structural. Now, I know you mentioned in the book about the social media, like a platform which is, Muslim mamas, and obviously there's others as well. So we're not just obviously focusing on one, but just generally, because there's a quote in the book where you mention Muslim women are alien, othered, and dehumanized. Now, these platforms that exist out of the educational, I guess, sphere, which obviously is, so something like Muslim Mamas or, something similar to that, where there's a lot of communication, I guess, going on there, isn't there, between mothers themselves? So then, can social media platforms like those do more, do you think, to then, I don't know, whether it's to link in with the education system or to, again, kind of bridge that gap that we were talking about earlier?
Well, I think they've got a really important role. They're really powerful, actually. And I'm on 2 or 3 different, just like Facebook pages, which are Muslim parents, Muslim mothers. And I think the pages that are specifically about parents and the education system have been very helpful. If anything, they share information on protocol policies, how to approach a school before things get out of hand sometimes.
Sure.
And also on the positive side, it's not all about problems.
Yeah, of
There's
course,
a lot of really good stories that go around just in the comments, that it's Eid coming up and this is what we've done, this is how we communicated with the school, these are the things we made, some amazing moms out there doing some very, very positive work. And those platforms are great for sharing that, for sharing good practice.
Absolutely, yeah.
Both sides, because sometimes a mum will put something up about a problem and ask for advice. And there's so many useful comments that come through saying, we faced this as well, but we had this sort of communication, we explained things this way, and it was resolved really easily. As well as structural information by those who are obviously professional and they know the ropes. They share that kind of information of procedure.
Yes.
And a lot of parents, especially when it's your own child, it's very emotional. If you're going through a problem or you hit a roadblock, even that really well-informed parents, it becomes difficult to think clearly because it's your own child.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's just,
and so it's not all nice and cut and dry.
Yeah.
So those platforms then are excellent, I find, because they give a balance. If somebody replies with something a little bit off the mark, someone else will say, well, actually, no, I've had a different experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think this went really well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I actually think, how did we cope? In my time when my kids were little, there was no social media, there's no internet. I'm a dinosaur in comparison. So we had to spend a lot of actual time, real time, with each other. Talking to each other, a lot of more coffee mornings, a lot more of that kind of thing, to support each other and say, okay, and it wasn't all problems. It was a lot of it was very positive, like running little projects in school, cultural projects, all voluntary, cultural days, food days, dress days, whatever it was, diversity linked. that had to be done on the ground. You're all so luckier with these social media platforms. You've got instant communication.
Yeah, I can vouch for that, because I'm always on WhatsApp with some of the mums going, oh, so like, if, for example, World Book Day, oh, what's your child? Are you making something? No, I'm just going to go to the shop and be lazy. And but it's nice to be able to just have those really, just kind of average discussions as any mum would. But yeah, you're right. And it's about kind of creating this, we always talk about this village and being able to raise children in this way, and how obviously we've in some ways lost that, but then also this interconnectedness, whether it is, in cyberspace, but at least it's, it's something there, which is so wonderful. And we are just going to be approaching the break soon. But is there any way that people, if they want to get more information, how can they get in touch with you? Or where's the best place they can even purchase the book?
Sure. There's a muslimmothers.org website, which is all about the book, and there's a contact form there. There is a Muslim Mothers Facebook page, which is a book page. I'm not confusing that with the big platform. This is all book related.
Yes.
And they're welcome to contact me through that. There's also my writing website, The Rooted Writer.
Oh, lovely.
That's .co.uk.
Okay.
And that's probably the easiest way to get in contact. But I think to just say, as a last moment, for mums to really share good practice, because there are a lot of great teachers out there as well.
Thank you. And we're just going to head to the break, but thank you so much, Suma, for your time today.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Book Club Show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana. It is Tuesday the 8th of October and it's 10:30. I hope you grabbed yourself a cup of tea in between the break. We are today discussing Muslim mothers and their children's schooling by Suma Din. We were joined just before the break on the phone, and we had a lovely discussion with Suma about this absolutely amazing book and this, I guess, collection of stories. So as Suma was saying that she spoke to about, I think it's 50, if I can remember, over 50 women from a wide range of African, Arab and Asian backgrounds, different classes, some of them immigrants and some born in the UK. And it was really interesting just to really speak to Suma about some of the findings in terms of almost like a communication gap perhaps between parents and teachers, or Muslim mothers, obviously in this instance, to be more specific, and how we can try to bridge that. And I definitely believe that this book is definitely a start to that, this idea that we've been able to have a platform where is a resource, and really important resource, I think, for teachers and educators, where they are now at least able to go to something and I guess really empower themselves. And I'm talking specifically about teachers. And what I was going to do is actually read a little section of the book, which honestly, when I was reading it, I just thought, oh my gosh, that this is just it's kind of where we are, I guess, at the moment when it comes to what Suma was saying in terms of perceptions about Muslim mums. And when we, and not even maybe just Muslim mums, but even just Muslim women, and we know in the current social political climate that we are always, and I know I say this line all the time, but it's because it's true. We are kind of spoken about and not really spoken to. And then this kind of then just spirals into these really weird perceptions that sometimes people have. And a lot of it is actually sometimes down to, I would say, perceptions of race and cultural background and class. So all these things and all these intersections, I think, mean that there are definitely misconceptions, and I do feel that there are some institutions that really need to address this. And the only way really I think that we can start addressing is to really looking at the history of Britain and its relationship with other countries. So when we talk about post-colonialism, and we talk about there's lots of discourse at the moment about deconstructing the curriculum and what that actually means. And in the past I've spoken a lot about representation and all the amazing kind of people with a platform who are constantly talking about why that's important. So when we talk about this word diversity, what does it actually mean? And I think for myself as a mother and also as a teacher, when we talk about diversity in or diverse range of opinions in the education sector, it's so important that we start picking that, because, you know, you only need to look at some of the, I guess, rules or coming out, you know, from the government or even perceptions. So if we, you know, talk about the Casey report in terms of, you know, apparently, you know, mums from, or Muslim mums, let's be specific, you know, not knowing English and they need to learn English more, but they're not addressing the fact that actually there's been such a huge cut in funding to ESOL classes. So how are we meant to, you know, bridge these gaps? So so coming back to the book Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling, I'm just going to then read out this section, and it's quite it's in the start of the book, and I'm just trying to find it because I've lost my page because I got completely engrossed in talking about politics, which is always a bad thing to do, but not really bad, it's just anyway. Right, so this bit of the book, which is actually part of the preface of is called Lost in Turnips ? 2 hours into the staff inset and the presentation was coming to an end. The condensed, tightly packaged account of the main beliefs, festivals and ideas for contextualizing the Quran and Ramadan had been delivered through the PowerPoint, resources and intermittent dialogue. As one does at the end of a session, I asked, "Any other questions? We still have a bit of time." It was a full catch, with several questions on anticipated themes, protocols about using Quran in class, the 2 Eids, prayer rituals and so on, but one question stood out. A teacher who hadn't spoken before raised her hand from the furthest point of the semicircle, cleared her throat and proceeded. I take a year 2 class and we were doing some food tasting. I'd sent letters home to say what we were doing, but there was this one kid who said he was told not to touch anything, and he didn't. I mean, he wouldn't. So I wanted to ask. She shuffled forward on her chair, lowered her head, as one does before delivering bad news, and asked, "Can Muslim children, can they touch vegetables? I mean, is it all right, or aren't they supposed to?" I repeated a question for those sitting at the other end of the semicircle, and to make sure I had heard it correctly. Amongst the answers and observations racing through my mind, I began my answer, suspecting that this was another case of lost in translation on the part of the child. It was lost on the teacher too. "Yes," I replied, "Muslim children can touch vegetables and pulses and grains and just about every edible thing on earth if the need arises." But I had to say more. Growing up with 2 other languages as well as English, this seems to me like a case of a young child mistranslating something their parent had said. Maybe mum or dad made an arbitrary comment in Arabic, let's say, not to touch anyone's food at school, or not to eat just anything someone gives you at school, which filtered through a 6-year-old's head into a rather odd sounding, "I'm not allowed to touch any food." In my head, I heard some of the daily phrases my mother uses and the absurdity of trying to translate them. I continued, "I know when I think of phrases from Bengali and Urdu, if I translate them literally, they'll sound odd. Translations complex at the best of times. But I can assure you, there has never been a problem of touching vegetables in the Muslim past, nor is there in the present, nor will there be in the future." She smiled and nodded her understanding. But something inside me shifted, from optimism to reality. Is this where we've arrived? How did we get to a stage where a child's faith identity is so alien that the most normal of norms invites a question like this? So there we have it. And I have to admit, just reading that out, I was just about to kind of actually giggle, and I mean that with utmost respect to obviously the teacher who asked that question. But it's probably giggle more of actually exasperation and just echoing that sentiment of is that really where we are kind of at the moment? And the fact that this then, in this book, Muslim Mothers and Their Children's Schooling by Suma, and obviously that is, and then basically after this excerpt, it goes on to say, "That morning reminded me of a friend's story about him being invited to visit a primary school class as a guest," and goes on to think about different situations and conversations similar to that. And I think it's just so important that when we talk about, perceptions and this idea of lost in translation, or in this case, lost in turnips, that how much actually really does need to be done in terms of addressing these issues. And why is it that as soon as, and again, this is, I guess, my own opinion, but if we are dealing with a child from particular maybe background, or a background which is different to ours, this othering, I think, sometimes leads to the misconceptions as well. Now, not everyone might agree with that, but I think that had that child been not a Muslim child and not maybe from a particular ethnicity, and had said, I'm not allowed to touch any food, I have a feeling that teacher wouldn't have answered that question, right? It wouldn't have said, oh, or so-and-so not allowed to touch vegetables, because there's a default position that if you are, for example, an English white child, let's say, that it doesn't invite all these different, perceptions of your identity. But as soon as you are othered, it's same, for example, myself, I sometimes am in spaces and where I might just be the only kind of South Asian, Muslim, visibly Muslim woman. And I can see that, of course, and it's not done, with, malicious intent or anything, but, feeling othered and then being asked questions where you suddenly feel that, you're on, am I on display, that people are asking me certain, questions which they wouldn't be asking anybody else, and you're always trying to navigate these conversations. And again, I think as a teacher, and Suma mentioned that obviously the book itself is published by UCL, the Institute of Education, and I did my teacher training at the Institute of Education, and it was a wonderful experience. I definitely believe that I received probably one of the best, or I had access to the best training that there was. But even then, I think there is always something lacking, because I don't ever remember being able to go through teacher training and talk about those things which are so a part of an essence of the education system, where then I would, for example, go on and have a 3-week placement or however long it is at an inner London school, because that's where I'm originally from, and not be able to really talk about things that might feel resonant with the children that I was speaking to. So, for example, if I'm talking to a class which is predominantly, South Asian, let's say, and I'm just sitting there talking about, books of certain authors, or I'm talking about even, because I have a background in science as a science teacher, just talking about different, science experiments or any kind of scientific research, and having to then look to the Islamic civilization and talk about all the different inventions and all the discoveries that we made in terms of those of Muslim heritage. But that was never ever talked about when I was actually being trained as a teacher. So that was me having to rely, I guess, on my own knowledge that is being imparted to me, I guess, through my own teachers or my parents. But so even an institution which could be really highly regarded, and even the last book at the last book club show, we talked about A Fly Girl's Guide to University, and written by 4 wonderful authors from who'd studied at Cambridge, and this idea that there's not enough maybe being done by the educational institutions to be representative in terms of the discourse that's happening, and that's the thing. I think when we to have a book like Muslim Mothers and the Children's Schooling on the shelf, where teachers have access to it, I think it is one of those things that gives an opportunity for those for the onus really to be on the teachers as well, because as Suma said, who's obviously the author of the book, that the Muslim mothers that are out there, they are highly invested in their children's education, and like she said, they don't. It's not that they don't just want to go in and always be complaining. It's really about wanting to be part of the school system, and now what can schools do to bridge that gap? And I think I've seen a lot of, for example, my daughter's a primary school age. I've seen it myself, where I think schools could really do much more in talking about the process. And I thought that was really interesting. So there's one hand where schools, or actually any kind of establishment, they might be putting on events, or they might be putting on, creating these groups that you can be a part of. But unless you haven't shared the information on how to do that, and I think when a lot of us, in maybe, where there's corporate environment or whatever kind of sector that we work in, when we talk about engagement or the lack of engagement, we really need need to start questioning that. Is it enough just to be creating work? How is it that we are actually going to do this kind of, and we talk a lot about in the arts about co-creation. What does that really mean? And I completely echo, I think, what Suma is saying. It is about communication. It's about not only telling people this is happening, but actually having that space where you can sit down together and have those conversations and say, well, this is, how to get involved, or this is how I can support you, or we can support each other. And I think those things are just so important. And again, I think we also touched upon with Suma just before the break, and I read out a quote which says, Muslim women are alien, othered and dehumanized. What can we maybe do more to challenge the sensationalist media depictions, more specifically? And again, we know in terms of the role of the government and some of the comments that, our current Prime Minister has made about Muslim women, and when we know that there's a structural system out there which is actually almost geared towards not wanting actually to give Muslim mothers a platform, then what can we do as Muslim mothers to make sure that actually we are empowering ourselves to have our voices heard? And I think that's why, I actually I'm quite grateful to Suma to have put on all that time and effort to research and meet these mothers, to be able to give a platform to their stories, and being able to talk about all the different not even just concerns, but just generally their stories about what the education means to them of their children themselves. And the book also touches upon the prevent duty, and how and honestly just reading some of the impacts that the prevent duty has had on how the mothers are made to feel in terms of bringing up their children. And it's I mean, I use violent in a way which I guess is obviously not physical, but I think not all violence really needs to be physical. But the fact that something like prevent duty is actually silencing Muslims specifically, because we do know that partly we are being targeted through it, even though, and even at the moment, because the Commissioner for Counter-Extremism, they are releasing a report, or I think they might have already done it yesterday. And again, these things that it's a duty now on teachers and obviously other professionals as well, that if they see that a child might be prone to the risk of radicalization and what those signs are, but I'm really worried as a mother myself, if my daughter, who will be turning 10 soon, if at any point she decides to wear hijab, then it's something that I worry about, because that could potentially be seen as a sign of, radicalization. And as, crazy as that sounds, that's exactly where we're at. And obviously we can talk about context and we can say, oh no, but the thing is, this is it. If there is a teacher who maybe has already some misconceptions about those of the Muslim faith, and they see something which then they think is a sign of, whatever, radicalization, whatever they think, then that's a problem. Because, even I've seen on social media over the past couple of days, there's been a leak of the fact that there's been a database, so all people that have been referred to prevent, they've now actually got a database of names. And how it's something of a huge concern for us as parents to know that actually whether it's ourselves or our children are on a database that we have actually no idea who has access to, and how will that impact them when they're older. So if any of our children want to criticize or critique even policy or anything to do really with politics, does that now suddenly mean that they are an extremist? And I think it's really important that we start having these conversations. And even me talking right now, all I'm doing is really presenting the other side of an argument. And I think it's important for a book like this, where Muslim mothers and their children's schooling, it touches upon all those different things. And I think it's so important that actually we can really have that nuanced discussion around Muslim mothers. And again, there's this, I guess, again, a conversation that needs to be had, and maybe what can, head teachers do? I mean, if it was up to me, I would probably send this book to all the head teachers in the country. And I think, even use it as part of teacher training. I didn't actually get a chance to ask Suma if maybe that is already the case, whether this research is actually, being used to, to be incorporated as part of, teacher training, which I think would be, absolutely fantastic. So I think on the whole, it's just really important that actually all of us, I know obviously the book itself is about Muslim mothers, but actually it's recommended, I guess, for anybody to read who might be in the education system or have any, even if you're working with young people, to just take some time out and maybe, read some of the research that, Suma has shared in the book. And I think even, for example, we were talking a lot about, social media and what impact that has. And obviously I mentioned that, I'm on WhatsApp, which means I'm really connected to lots of mums out there. And actually it's amazing. And it's true. It's not always about kind of negative or some concerns or something we're worried about. I mean, there's one group where literally mums, we're sharing, health tips, not just for children, but, even for ourselves as mothers, or, whether it's, something like, what's somebody making for dinner? And, because actually just this morning I was speaking to a mother saying how much time, mental time I take to work out, okay, what, needs to be cooked for dinner today, or your kids are demanding this, or one's demanding this and somebody else wants that. And it's just the amount of time actually we spend as mums on food is kind of ridiculous actually. So yeah, and there's so much to talk about in terms of the things that we can do to really, like I said, empower ourselves, and how our faith actually helps us to do that, and just to be confident and to know that actually whatever space that we're in, we belong there. And I think for any mothers who are listening who perhaps, communication might be an issue because maybe English isn't your first language. And I think, when I think about my mother and I think about, the struggles that she would have faced, for first coming here, and how obviously it took a long time, I guess, for her to kind of gain that confidence in being able to speak English and being able to speak, to teachers. But I've also then seen mothers now who at the moment, if you talk about in the context of Luton, there are some mothers who, haven't been born here, but they are completely, invested in their children's education. I have mums who I've seen who maybe their English level of English isn't great, but they are they're at the parents' evenings, they are part of the parent forum, at my daughter's school, and they are at least present and they know what's going on. I mean, there's all what they'll do is they'll come and then maybe they'll put me to the side afterwards and say, look, could you explain this bit that I didn't quite understand what was being said? And I think it's that communication and that, I think, just to be present. And I think that's the only thing that I could really say. And I guess for my own experience, I do try my best to be involved in my children's schools as much as possible. So yes, I am part of the parent forum. I know many mothers who are also on the governing boards of schools, and I think it's absolutely fantastic because anything that comes up, you are there then, especially like again in the context of Luton, where we have many people from the Muslim faith, you are at least able to represent and give a platform to your own, I guess, your communities. And this is not just South Asian, because we know in Luton we are a very, very diverse town. And that's the other thing I think which is lovely, what Suma also touched upon, that we have this diversity within diversity. The fact that there are some people out there who, as soon as they think Muslim, they think of somebody Pakistani, right? And obviously we know that's not the case, right? And actually even ourselves in our own communities, and I'm now talking as a Pakistani mother, also have to come out of this mindset that we aren't just in one bubble where we are just with people from our own kind of sharing things about our own cultural heritage. And actually we do have mothers from all different backgrounds, and again making sure that we're also making those connections, and and I think it can be a really beautiful thing that we can then come together and then have those discussions, and how can we then work with schools to get them to understand what our needs are. So whether it's something like swimming. I remember when I was a teacher, I had a Muslim student come up to me and said she was really concerned that when they go, and it was a mixed school, that when they go to swimming, then obviously they are sometimes feeling that they don't have enough privacy when at the time of, just during swimming, and how it'd be really great, or she would feel more comfortable having segregated swimming sessions. Now for me as a teacher, a young person come to me and voiced a concern, I felt it was my responsibility to at least share that with the swimming teacher or the PE teacher at the time. And honestly, as soon as I said it, the defense, this barrier went straight up, and all I was saying was I just want to have a conversation. I wasn't expecting them to completely change the school protocol just because I've got a few Muslim girls saying they want this, but it was the reaction, I guess, of the teacher, that the defense mechanism went straight up, and it was very much like, oh no, we don't do this, it's not part of in this legal requirement, and kind of just almost throwing the book back at me. And I just, there were times like that, and I just thought, gosh, this is really, really odd that I can't even share the opinion of a young person without it becoming almost like a battle. And I think those are the kind of mindsets that we really need to change. Or, again, as a science teacher, just being able to talk about, the theory of evolution, and, there's, there's obviously it's what truth is in there, and how do we talk about that? And even we have scholars who actually say there is evidence for evolution, and so we've got all these different conversations that are being had. But again, I remember just saying something to another colleague about Darwin and things like that, and again just kind of really feeling like I've gone into a territory that apparently I'm not allowed to go in, because it's like a done thing, and we shouldn't even be talking about it or even discussing it. And I think this is when I know there's a lot of conversation at the moment about freedom of speech and the freedom to offend and all these things, and it can get quite complicated. But I think ourselves as Muslim mothers, we just need to stand our ground. I think we need to be confident, and I think always we know we always have our faith that we can hold on to, and of course it's important to be in all these spaces, but then also to be reading ourselves. So for anyone who hasn't maybe read the book or have a copy, I would definitely recommend getting Muslim Mothers and Their Children Schooling by Suma Din, and you can get information through the Institute of Education Press, or also the Rooted Writer, which is Suma's blog, so you can get in touch with her that way. She also mentioned there's a Muslim Mothers Facebook page, which is obviously just related to the book, and it's really important to I think keep in touch with each other, and let's just do more reading, and and that's obviously a great plug for my show. So obviously the Book Club Show is every fortnightly on Tuesday, so I will be back in a couple of weeks on a Tuesday morning talking about another fantastic book. It's actually called Quiet, and it's, so if any of you are introverts, I would say you must tune in, because that's going to be a really interesting discussion. I will have another guest on the show with me. In the meantime, I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org, and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.